Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Daniel Davis Deep Dive Roadshow edition. We're still in Houston, Texas. I often talk about how this is a war of attrition, that the Ukraine side can't win because of all the complements of different categories that go into war-making capacity, defense capabilities, manpower, strategies, all those kinds of things, that they're irrevocably in the Russian favor and that Ukraine cannot avoid loss. The only thing they can do is to have a negotiated settlement on the best ugly terms available, or over time it's going to suffer a defeat. Now, many people don't like to hear that, and many people in the West, especially leaders, apparently don't believe it. But I'm going to show you another really graphic example today that validates that position. And I really hope that this gets to the President of the United States, who's going to address the UN General Assembly this coming week and is going to meet with Zelensky on the sidelines before that, where Zelensky is going to beg President Trump to do something that's antithetical to American interest. And I hope he doesn't do that as well. But first of all, let's start off. There was an article in the New York Times earlier this week that was looking at the drone production issue. We're talking about the strategic kind of drones, the Garand 2s, and possibly even now the Garand 3s that have been flying for a long time into Ukrainian airspace and causing such difficulties. It's important to see things in context and not just whatever happened today. And by the way, what did happen today was that there was another round of over 600 additional air attacks. Both drones, decoys, and missiles went into Ukraine. And again, a good number of them found their targets. And it just continues this near methodical nightly destruction of the Ukraine energy infrastructure, their ability to produce weapons, the trains and transport, et cetera, attacking oil infrastructure, ammunition, weapons, depots, et cetera, all throughout the country. Obviously, you can't sustain that for a long time, but let me show you what this looks like over time, because this piece in the New York Times here, Russia made drone production a supreme priority. Now it swarms the skies. Russian drone attacks began amping up last September, the first month in the war, that Moscow sent over 1,000 drones into Ukraine. This year, the numbers have skyrocketed. Russia has so far sent more than 34,000 attack drones and decoys into Ukraine in 2025, nearly 9 times the number from that period last year. Now, that tells you right there, I mean, and that the headline and then the information that Russia recognized that they are in an attritional warfare. Now, that's important to understand, because that gives you an insight into how Russia is waging this war. They're not doing it like the United States. So when you keep hearing, like Emmanuel Macron did about a month ago, where he literally mocked Russia because they've only taken 1% of territory in the last, I think it was like 18 months or something like that. And you hear so many people, Keith Kellogg, just a week ago, 6 days ago, I think specifically, said from Ukraine that Moscow is losing this war. Because if they were winning, they would have already taken Kiev. Because if Russia was doing it like we would do it, and they haven't, ergo, they're losing. Except that that's not what Russia's doing. And you have to look at what Russia's doing to understand what the threat may be, because they haven't taken that large territory for sure. That's a fact. But what they are causing and what the implications of what Russia is doing very much underscores what Russia's war aims are, because you can't just continue to fight forever. If you're losing more men every day, if you're losing some territory, but if you're losing the capacity to wage war every day. See, that's what you need to understand. That's why Russia prioritized the drone issue, the strategic drones, the Garands, et cetera, the missiles, Kinzhals, and the hypersonics that they fire. Russia is decided to engage in a methodical war of attrition, and they have said, all right, we're going to prioritize destroying their strategic assets and just methodically droning every night into the rear of this country, which they can't stop. And it's ironic, because Zelensky continues to say, hey, I want more air defense weapons. This is the thing they need the most. And yet they claim they shoot down this huge percentage of them. I'm very skeptical of that. We have no independent verification. They claim they're getting like 92% to 88% of everything that comes in. Maybe it's true. I can't dispute that, because I'm not there. I can't see. But just based on the damage that we have and the number of drones that continue to go in, it seems unlikely. But it doesn't matter. Let's just say, let's give them the benefit of the doubt and say that, yes, they are shooting down 93%. And Russia's, when they increase the volume of drones that are going in each night, and that number goes up each month. And now then you see 9 times gains in 1 year. You can see you just can't sustain that forever. That's not enough to knock Ukraine out so far. But when you compare what's going on in the air with what's also going on in the ground, then you see it's very clearly an unsustainable situation. In fact, let me show you a graphic from that same article there. You see this. This goes from January 2024 on the far left up through the current month into September, and you see this very clear starting in looks like about September of 2024. You can see that's what they were talking about there. You see a clear jump in the number of weekly drone strikes, and then you see this huge number spiking up over 2,000 in looks like either late July or early August. They're up near 2,000 in September already. And the numbers, and this is per week. And so the numbers just continue to rise. And you see that the red margin there, the red color there, the brown, tan color, et cetera, is the number of drones. And then the red are the number that get through, that are not intercepted. And so you see that number also, that not intercepted, continues to increase as well. And Russia's just playing a numbers game. So they're just saying, okay, look, we're just going to keep firing all of these drones that we have. We're going to just continue to make them. And obviously they have a long-term economic plan. Despite what the oil situation may or may not be in the future, they have a plan and the resourced plan and the capability to just continue to accelerate this. The Ukrainian defense minister this morning said that the expectation is, and their intelligence reveals, that Russia will continue expanding through the remainder of this year, at least the number of drones produced. And I think I showed you about a month or so ago some satellite imagery of a massive production facility that was under construction, and that's under that means in that, and that would probably be months before it was even operational, probably many months, meaning that whatever they're going to do by the end of the year won't stop increasing then. So everything you just saw on that chart going back through September of last year, you see that arc is continue on to increase. There's every reason to expect that arc will continue to go up into 2026. So when you take a look at what that stuff is hitting, and even if Ukraine gets more inter-area Patriot missiles, which he claims that this $500 million package, these pair of $500 million packages from Trump, they're going to include some air defense systems with Patriot. But Patriots aren't going to shoot a lot of that down. It's not commonly understood, but not a lot of those drones are actually shot down by the Patriots. Patriots are used primarily for Russian missiles that are coming in. There's not a huge number of missiles. I think last night's barrage was 34 missiles, if I understood correctly, as opposed to 600 or nearly 600 and something drones and decoys of various kinds. So you see, if that continues to accelerate, just having more Patriots is not even going to address the Garand situation, because apparently most of those are shot down with other means. Ukraine is doing everything it can to use other drones to shoot down. It's very sophisticated, very clever what they're doing. They just can't scale it up is part of the problem. They're using trucks in open fields where along the historic routes where these things come in there. They have gun trucks where they have like 50 caliber machine guns and other kinds of weapons in the back, and they'll be able to try and take these things down. They have some success over that. So those aren't Patriot, meaning that whatever he gets in his package will have hardly any, if any at all, impact on the drone warfare. So you can see this red number here on the bottom. That's the one that matters. And so when Russia's really looking not to get the tan numbers up there, those they don't care about so much. They care about the red factor there, the number that get through, and they don't care what the reason for that getting through is, whether that's because they have more of them and they can't sustain it, or they use more creative ways to get them through. In fact, it's one of the other things mentioned in this New York Times article. It says that Moscow is sending the attack drones in swarms or waves and routing them in confusing paths to divert attention from actual targets. It is sending many more decoys, and it is bypassing the open fields where Ukrainian air defense teams work, flying over rivers and forests instead. Once the drones enter cities, they are harder to shoot down because of tall buildings and the risks to civilians. So you see, it's not merely that Russia is producing more drones. Like any organization, like any warfare, this certainly includes the Ukraine side, they're adapting and they're adjusting based on the changing conditions. So Russia is not sitting by static. Too many times I think we in the West think that, okay, well, if we can just get another aid package. And so whatever the balance of power and the balance of forces is at any given moment, we'll say, okay, well, here's where Russia is. So we need to get up to here. So let's get more of X, Y, and Z capability, and let's get more money, et cetera. So then that'll put us above. And then, yay, somehow things can start to change. But that completely ignores the fact that Russia is a dynamic situation. It's not static. And as the Ukraine side does whatever it can to escalate, to elevate, Russia will respond as they always do. Or in the case of some of these drone situations right now, it's Ukraine that's having to respond to the Russian changes, which are advancing and elevating them even more than they were before. And so what this tells you is that this war simply cannot be won by the Ukraine side. When you look at then also what's happening on the front lines, with the continued methodical operations of the Russian side, then you understand that there's no way out of this. Because here's what you need. Let me put a fine point on this because it is so important to understand. Russia's not fighting the way the United States military does. Russia at this point isn't even fighting the way it did in World War II, where it just used these bludgeoning tactics and just accepted this massive number of casualties and just had this relentless train-like locomotive blow across from their territory all the way through to Berlin to end the war there. And they seemed to not care, literally didn't care about casualties. They had this massive production capability in all the armaments of war, ammunition, tanks, armored personnel carriers, everything you need, aircraft, et cetera. And they weren't concerned about losing men. So they lost in total somewhere around 20 to 30 million people. Some say as high as 40 million. I don't know the actual number, but it's massive at that time. And that's why they moved so fast, because they weren't worried about that. And the German side couldn't stop it. And so they just wanted to end the war as quickly as possible. And that's why they did that. Current Russian leadership in the Kremlin is using a very different tactic and strategy. They're not doing what we did. They're not doing what the Soviets did in the past. Instead, they're doing something. They're taking the long play here. They have chosen to go the long route, which is we're going to prioritize preserving our manpower. Unlike the Soviets, where they didn't care about the casualties, this Russian leadership cares a lot about the friendly casualties. So they're not doing these big waves, and they could, because by all reputable accounts I can get from both sides of the equation here, Russia has somewhere around 700,000 troops inside of Ukraine. And Ukraine has maybe 250,000 actually along the line of contact, facing off against them. So Russia could just pick 1 or 2 weak spots wherever they could find them and then just bludgeon across. And there's nothing Ukraine could do to stop them. They could impose a serious loss and casualties at those points for a while, but then Russia could simply overwhelm them with manpower and then blow through. I don't know why they haven't chosen that. Just taking the morality out of it for a moment, or taking my side, his side out of it, just from a military perspective, I'm puzzled why they don't do that. If the manpower advantage is as high as the Ukraine side claims it is, and as the Russian side claims it is, then it seems to me that the most efficient thing to do would be to make a big push like that. But they have chosen not to. Instead, what they have chosen to do is play the long game. And you see these production facilities continue to go into operation, continue to be built. And it looks like they're saying, we don't need a quick resolution of this. I'm going to preserve as many of my men as I can, and we're just going to methodically whittle away. So where you see General Kellogg last week saying, well, because Russia hasn't gained all this territory, and in fact, when you look recently, there hasn't been a lot of territorial change. There's little bits and pieces here and there in parts of Pokrovsk and parts of Kupiansk, down in Zaporizhia, but they're relatively small. Even by recent gains of this year, it's been relatively small. What hasn't been relatively small, though, is the Ukrainian losses in manpower. That's what they continue to bleed, and that is really the central core issue for Ukraine. It's the number of men that they have. They can do things with air defense that they can try and come up with their own offensive drone capability, and they're doing both of those things, but everything hinges on the manpower issue. And it seems to me that Russia has correctly recognized that and has made that the center of gravity for their operation, to say we're going to use our strategic air power to whittle away at the support for the Ukraine front line, and then they're going to use their local firepower. And there are thousands I think like 4,000 to 5,000 per day of the various types of attack drones on the front lines. And apparently there's also some of the older model of Garand, the Garand 1s, which are a lot easier to shoot down on the strategic side. They've been using those in the line of contact as well. So they are prioritizing destroying the Ukrainian military per se. So part of their negotiated end to this is going to be a demilitarization where there's a limited number of troops that are allowed to continue to live for Ukraine, et cetera. But it looks like Russia's saying, we don't think you'll ever agree to that. So we're going to physically do that ourselves. This could take a lot of time because, like I've said, there's different examples in history where an army gets broken through and then their morale collapses and the entire army collapses, like what happened to France and UK in World War II in May 1940, where they literally collapsed overnight, like within a month. Or you have the example of the German army in World War II, where even though all the evidence showed that they had lost the war and they could never recover and that there was no possibility of stopping the Soviets, yet they never gave up. They never surrendered. And they waited until they were literally just demolished all the way up to Berlin. So we don't know which way it's going to go. It appears that Russia has calculated, we're going to assume the latter. We're going to assume they're not going to collapse, they're not going to break, and we're not going to do what the Soviets did and lose a bunch of our people in the meantime. They're looking long term, so they want as many of their men alive as they can at the end. And even if that takes another year, 2 years, who knows how much longer they may think. Apparently, according to Western analysts, Western intelligence, Russia could fight the way it's doing through the year 2027. Everything they could do with your economic potential, industrial capacity. Certainly the drones continue to escalate in the manpower. They can continue to recruit enough people to keep this going at current levels through 2027. There's almost no way that Ukraine can, because they simply don't have the inputs. They don't have the physical manpower to be able to sustain it that long. So the increasing chances that things are going to continue to go the eroding way that they are. And then simply because at some point, even if Russia isn't trying to press too hard, but because there's just not enough men, then the gains will start picking up speed. That's what we can expect. But that's what you need to understand. That is Russia's clearly now, I think, not articulated, but observable strategy. They are using the anaconda slow death deal. They're just going to surround you slowly and just eventually squeeze you to death. They're not going to go with the big breakthrough model. Though I guess that could change at any time. They have the wherewithal to do it. They just haven't so far. But it looks like they have chosen the anaconda strangulation strategy, and they're going to go until Ukraine is eventually just ground to dust and finally suffocates. That's what it appears. Now, on top of all this, now then you have this at the diplomatic / strategic view on the West. And there's going to be, as there always is in September, the United Nations General Assembly meetings where heads of state will come and they'll make their case. And there's lots of things that are always going on with that. But I think it's on Tuesday, President Trump will make the American speech. And then on Wednesday, it's going to be Zelensky's going to make the Ukrainian speech. Now, according to media this morning, President Zelensky is looking to talk to President Trump because he's like saying, hey, I'm looking for some security guarantees. Says Zelensky plans to meet with Trump on the sidelines of the UN Assembly as Russian strikes persist. This is in today's news. And then you scrolled in here to the real important part. I would like to receive the signals, this is Zelensky, how close we are to understanding that the security guarantees from all partners are those that we need, Zelensky told reporters. We have prepared the basis for security guarantees that Europe is ready to adopt, taking into account that the United States of America will be there. We have had many discussions, including among the leaders of our armies and general staffs with the Europeans and the Americans. And then he's apparently wanting to get with Trump to get those agreements before that General Assembly meeting, because he wants to hear Trump say something about it in his, so then he can say Zelensky in his speech the next day. And I just got to think, I don't know what Trump's playing all this is. So sometimes I think he's content for the war to just go on because he calculates as the businessman, we can make a lot of money. We can make $1 billion a month in arms sales for our country. Now, that's a separate issue, whether we can afford to do that and whether our arsenals can afford that. That's one of my big problems. My worry is that he will do that thinking in the near term only, whereas Russia's thinking long term. Trump seems to be thinking near term and financially that we can make money by this, not paying attention to the fact that our industrial capacity, even in its slightly expanded version from 2022, can't provide $1 billion worth of weapons and ammunition and continue to rebuild our own stockpiles. You can't do both of those at the same time. So if you're giving that much away, then you are going to be depleting your stocks in many of these categories. That's just math. So, but I hope that President Trump won't say, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and just do what Zelensky asks and give security guarantees, even if it's just on paper, even if it's just, well, it won't really, but if it'll make you feel better, we'll see something. We don't need any of that. What Trump needs to do, obviously, I mean, you're talking about this forever. Acknowledge reality. Acknowledge this can't be won. Say some of the same things I've just did. It is suicidal for Ukraine to continue going on. There's not enough ammunition and weapon writ large across the entire Western world to be able to allow them to even maintain the line of contact, much less to ever inflict a loss on the Russian side and drive them off of anywhere, because they don't have the manpower. Even if you said, all right, now then, we no longer care about our own arsenals, all of NATO, the United States, we will literally give you, open the gates, you take anything you want. You have entire weapons and ammunition sets for an armored division from 7 or 8 different countries, massive amounts of stuff, all the ammunition you want. It's yours for the taking. They couldn't do anything with it. They could not win a war with it because they don't have the manpower, and they certainly don't have the trained manpower to get that done. That's how wars work. So what we should do is acknowledge that reality and say, okay, what we are going to do is we're going to end this war. And we're going to work with you and get the best deal for you that we can from Russia. And it's going to be ugly. And don't even pretend otherwise. It's going to be something you're not going to like. You're going to be anguished about it. But the killing can stop. The destruction of your country can stop. And the loss of further territory can stop. Because if you don't, and this should come from Trump to Zelensky, if you don't, then these ugly terms you think here that you find reprehensible and you would not sign your name to, it won't be yours to, it won't be your signature on it anymore. It will simply be the Russians who will take it over time after they have destroyed another generation of your manpower. Remember, Ukraine has now authorized people over 60 years of age to join the military so that they can, you do them in areas off the front line so that they can shove more people to the front line to be killed. That's not something that's very good. You see that's the desperation straits they're in. So you see Russia is equipped, they have the manpower, and they have the industrial capacity to wage the war as they are doing now and eventually succeed in the long term. We don't. Zelensky doesn't. So I hope that we see something like that. What I fear we're going to see is something different, where President Trump will just kind of kick the can down the road. I imagine he won't make any declarative statements. He'll probably make some statements about how he's angry about something. He's unhappy about this and that. He wants to see a change, but he won't make any material changes anywhere other than continuing to sell weapons. Maybe he'll do something even worse, which is say, I'm now going to put heavy secondary sanctions on China, Brazil. We're going to leave the ones on India. We're going to demand that Europe stop buying all oil and et cetera right now, no matter how much that would harm us. I hope he doesn't do that. That's out of the worst case scenario for us. The most likely scenario is that he's going to do what I just said about kicking the can down the road. And then the most hopeful scenario is that he's going to do what I just articulated here, which would be the one thing that could actually benefit our country and stop the destruction and the bloodshed, which apparently, allegedly, is Trump's objective. He could accomplish it in that way. So who knows? We'll just continue to hope that maybe that's what he ends up doing. But that's just where we are on this Saturday. So appreciate you guys being with us. Probably the next time you see me, I'll be back in my own studios. I'll be back on Tuesday. So we may be, who knows, maybe in an airport or something on Monday. I'm not sure the timing of this, if we're able to do anything at all, but we'll be traveling on Monday at some point. So for sure, by Tuesday, you'll see us back on our normal digs where we will give you the unintimidated, uncompromised truth that you deserve to make sense of the world around you. Thank you very much, folks. We'll see you on the next episode of Daniel Davis Deep Dive.